Now, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I am Amy Goodman as we turn now to part 2 of our interview with Dr. Cornel West and Tavis Smiley. They have just come out with a new book, The Rich and the Rest of Us, a Poverty Manifesto, which draws in part on a 10-state tour they conducted last year to highlight the issue of poverty in the United States. Professor Cornel West teaches religion and African-American studies at Princeton University and is headed to Union Theological Seminary in New York. He's authored many books. Tavis Smiley is an award-winning television and radio broadcaster, and does Tavis Smiley on PBS and the Tavis Smiley Show, and Smiley and West, which he hosts with Cornel West. In part 1 of our interview last week, Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez and I talked with Cornel West and Tavis Smiley about the absence of poverty as a political issue despite growing inequality that's increasing the ranks of the poor. We turn now to part 2 of that conversation. We continue by talking about their own backgrounds and how their upbringings have shaped the work they do on the issue of poverty today. We began by speaking with Tavis Smiley.
Let me just say, given that I regard Dr. West as the leading public intellectual in our nation, that I regard him as the Du Bois of our time. For all the good work we've done together for 25 years, nothing has delighted me more than to have my name on the cover of a book next to his name, because I so love and respect and revere Cornel West and his contributions to this great nation and the world for that matter. So to get a chance to sit and write a book with him where we bring our shared experiences and individual experiences to bear on a topic like poverty was just an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And our upbringings are very different. We are brothers connected at the heart, but grew up in very different environments. He can speak about his own, but I grew up as one of 10 kids. I'm the eldest of 10 kids. Grew up in a 3-bedroom trailer. My 7 brothers and me in 1 bedroom. My 2 sisters and my maternal grandmother, Big Mama, in the 2nd bedroom, and my mother and father, Joyce and Emery Smiley, in the 3rd bedroom. 13 people in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom trailer. That's how I was raised, in a trailer park with all white people. We were the only black family for miles around in this white trailer park.
Where?
In Indiana, north central Indiana. The good news about that is I learned at an early age that we can get along. If I can take Rodney King's question and answer it, yes, we can get along. America is a nation where black and white and red and brown and yellow can come together for the sake of making America a greater democracy. So I've always believed in the best of America. In that sense, I resonate with Martin's dream, rooted in the American dream. I resonate with Dr. King in that regard. On the other hand, though, I saw so much poverty growing up because I lived that story growing up. And I've been fortunate and I've been blessed. And the short answer is I know that even when we can't be optimistic, and Doc makes this point all the time, even when we can't be optimistic, we can always be hopeful. And I'm a witness, I'm an example that you can build an entire life on hope. As I've gotten older, though, I realize, though, that hope needs help. And those of us who have the platform and have the opportunity to speak for those who don't have a voice, Doc and I believe and argue in the book, that is the telling of truth that allows suffering to speak. So that the suffering is never heard, much less addressed, if those of us who have platforms like Democracy Now! Don't raise our voices to speak out on their behalf. That's why I celebrate what you do and celebrate the opportunity to do this book with Dr. West.
And Cornel West, the amazing thing about this is that poverty is no stranger to either of you. Talk about your
well, I didn't grow up in the same kind of poverty this brother did, though. He was broke as the 10 Commandments financially. We had some flow of resources, you know what I mean? It was more working class, lower middle class. But most importantly, we were spiritually rich. We were morally rich. Irene and Clifton, my parents, my brother Cliff, my sister Cynthia and Cher. I'm the father of Zaytun and Cliff and grandfather of Kaylin. I've lived an extremely blessed life, even though I come out of that both stable working class, lower middle class. And when I met this brother, we decided, what, 25 years ago?
You grew up in Sacramento.
Sacramento, California. Yeah, it was 25 years ago. I said, we are going to live and die to keep alive the legacy of Martin King and Fannie Lou. And
you were fighting from when you were in school. You were, what, president of your class, but fighting to include African-American studies?
Yeah, we had general strike. Absolutely.
What year was it?
That was 1969. We
and why did you
shut the
strike?
whole city down to make sure they had black studies in every high school. Who wanted it? We weren't authoritarian and coercive about it, you know. But already, you know, we had been set on fire by not just Martin King, but I was working closely with the Black Panther Party. As a Christian, of course, we had wonderful tensions. But I was working breakfast program, working with them every day, trying to ensure they had black studies. And so when Tavis and I come together, he's from Kokomo, Indiana, Sacramento, California. Boom. King legacy, 2012 in our own feeble way. I mean, you know, we just doing what we can do before we die.
And we've been covering extensively on democracy now when you talk about fighting for black studies in the schools, the battle in Arizona, in Tucson, over the state legislature passing a law that essentially bans Latino studies in the city of Tucson in the public schools there.
And the books that are the heart of the curriculum.
Yeah, and they banned the books that are the heart of the curriculum.
As you point out in your magisterial text, though, brother, in some ways that's a compliment, because when the powers that be want to suppress the truth, we know truth crushed the earth shall rise again. The truth is dangerous. Right. The truth is pushes people against the wall.
You both, in your book, The Rich and the Rest of Us, A Poverty Manifesto, refer to Dr. King. I wanted to play a clip of Dr. King. You talk about his campaign against poverty. This was the speech he gave not far from here, Riverside Church, April 4th, 1967, a year to the day before he was assassinated.
Tonight, however, I wish not to speak with Hanoi and the National Liberation Front, but rather to my fellow Americans. That is, at the outset, a very obvious and almost facile connection between the war in Vietnam and the struggle I and others have been waging in America. A few years ago, there was a shining moment in that struggle. It seemed as if there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. There were experiments, hopes, new beginnings. And then came the build-up in Vietnam, and I watched this program broken and eviscerated as if it was some idle political plaything of a society gone mad on war. And I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor so long as adventures like Vietnam continued to draw men and skills and money like some demonic destructive suction tube.
That was Dr. King, April 4th, 1967. Tavis Smiley, it's not the speech we usually hear when referring to Dr. King.
It is the most courageous speech that Martin King ever gave in his life, and for giving that speech, he was demonized. We talk about this in our work. King, in the last poll taken in his life about his acceptance and popularity in the country, 55% of black people had turned against Martin King because of his opposition to the Vietnam War. 72% of Americans across the board had turned against Dr. King because of his opposition to the war.
The New York Times and the Washington Post editorialized
they killed him.
They called him a communist.
They absolutely did.
Basically called him a communist. You know.
That speech is, again, the most courageous speech he ever gave, and there's one line in that speech, many lines, but one that always resonates with Dr. West and myself, and we talk about it in this book. We quote him in this text. War is the enemy of the poor. That's Martin King. War is the enemy of the poor. And the two of you, given the fine work you do here on this peace report every day, you understand that. All the resources, the $1 trillion+ we've spent in these military excursions. You can't even call them excursions now, because this is the longest war in the history of this country. It's not an excursion anymore.
Invasion, occupation.
Exactly. without obviously an exit strategy. But think of all the money spent there that could have been spent on programs here for the poor, number one. Number two, now that we're no longer in Iraq, as we once were at least, how will that money be spent domestically that was being spent in Iraq? And since I'm talking about money, and we're talking about this campaign for the White House, if Mitt Romney is going to raise, as the papers suggest, about $600 million this time around, Barack Obama last time raised $750 million, and will raise more now that he's an incumbent. I'm no math major. You put those two together, you're talking $1 billion+. Think of how much money, what that money could be used for vis-a-vis programs in this country. But there's so much money in our politics, both parties beholden to big business and to corporate America. And that's not even mentioning all the money now being activated by these super PACs. But just think about all that money to run a campaign for the White House. And what that money could be used for, it's sickening to me, quite frankly.
That was Tavis Smiley and Cornel West. They have just written their first book together, The Rich and the Rest of Us, A Poverty Manifesto. For the full interview, you can go to our website at democracynow.org, and that does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Felsar, and Monte Nermin Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sam Alcoff, Hani Massoud, Ravi Karan, Dina Guzder, Chantal Berman.